Earlier this summer, on Saturday, June 24th, a group of neo-Nazis from Florida arrived in front of this East Cobb synagogue and began an anti-Semitic protest that included the display of Nazi flags. This sparked outrage, confusion, and shock on an otherwise calm evening in this mostly residential area. This protest was met by an interfaith ceremony a couple of nights later that focused on the strength of our community and resulted in dozens of pledged acts of kindness. Cobb County Commissioner Jerica Richardson and I sat down with Rabbi Dorsch to discuss his reaction to all of these events and how he plans to lead the community to a brighter future.
Let's start with what happened on Saturday, June 24th. Where were you when you found out that this was happening?
So you may or may not be aware that among traditional Jewish communities, we don't use electricity on the Sabbath typically. And I'm sitting at home and my cell phone is just buzzing uncontrollably. At some point, I assumed that something major must have happened. Right. And on the Sabbath, it's customary if there's an emergency to use electricity. So I take a look and I'm getting phone calls and I am getting messages that there are neo-Nazis protesting at a neighboring congregation about 2-3 miles from here, not even, on Lower Roswell Road. People are really concerned. People want to know what the right thing to do is. On Friday, we had received a notice from the Anti-Defamation League with some guidance because it was rumored that this particular group that calls themselves the Goyim Defense League, which is quite a derogatory term to use for non-Jews to start with, so you know there's an issue, was going to possibly be protesting in various places in Georgia. I don't think any of us assumed it was going to be in our community. On the one hand, there were people that really felt like they needed to be there to speak out. And then there was the ADL and other groups saying, don't give these people the attention they deserve, just ignore them and they'll go away. And there was a little bit of a lack of clarity about what people should be doing because everybody felt like it was important to speak out. And the events of the next few week or so were really just a whirlwind as we as a community tried to come together and figure out what kind of mobilized response we should have together.
So people were asking you how they should respond. Did you struggle with that question of how to respond to something like this?
Yes, I did, because I think due in no small part to many of my colleagues and our work in the community over the past several years, we'd spent a lot of time talking about speaking out against anti-Semitism. I mean, and boy, is there any more anti-Semitic moment than neo-Nazis who, to be clear, by the way, are not from our community. We're from Florida and came into our state because they knew that our laws on the books were more lenient. And what is so interesting, by the way, as an aside to this, is that the Orthodox community at the time that was in the congregation didn't even know what was happening because they were on an electricity blackout. They didn't know what was happening outside until they walked out and they saw the police were present. So there was a lot of tension about how to handle that moment. I was inclined, just as an aside, to discourage people from going, not because, but because it could have been a threat, right, to the lives of folks.
The uncertainty.
The uncertainty of all that. Yeah.
It seemed like the greater community seemed to have various reactions as well. You know, confrontation on the day of, thoughts of a counter protest the next day, and that next day counter protest was canceled or scrapped, and an interfaith ceremony was held to bring the community together. So our now mutual friend Michelle approached you about this event. How did she reach out to you?
Michelle had reached out, or congregant really reached out to me and said, I know someone who knows someone. I mean, it's literally like 3 degrees of separation. And this person wants to do something good for the community. She feels really upset by what has happened. And she wants to know if there's a rabbi she can talk to you about it. Of course, I said, yes, I'm happy to do so. I wasn't really sure what the right response would be, but Michelle's words really stirred me into action. She had said she was the daughter of a Methodist minister, or stepdaughter of a Methodist minister, and her father would never have put up with this in her community. And that this was largely not a Jewish-led response, but a non-Jewish-led response. For the first time in Cobb County in the 7 years that I've been living here, it was the non-Jewish community who took the lead on coordinating this effort to respond to this unfortunate event. Because you looked around that room and you realized that this was a movement of, people like Michelle and like the pastor there, and just grassroots people coming together to say, not here. not here, not in our community. And to know that you are loved and cared about, and that there is a greater interfaith network in East Cobb and in this greater Cobb County of ours, which is, by the way, what I have experienced over the past 7 years being here, but that will serve as an ally to you, to let you know you're not alone. It's really, really important. And I think I left, as I said, just really inspired, truly, and feeling grateful for the moment.
Such hatred, bigotry, and disinformation do not belong in Cobb County and must be confronted. Whereas a small group of protesters held a demonstration outside of Chabad of East Cobb synagogue, waving Nazi flags and holding signs spreading false and inflammatory information. And whereas this incident comes on the heels of anti-Jewish propaganda flyers being distributed at Cobb County homes and neighborhoods across Georgia, including Atlanta, Cartersville, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, and Athens. And whereas the Board of Commissioners recognizes that any group has the right to free speech and the ability to peacefully protest, demonstrate, and distribute information regarding its beliefs, no matter how reprehensible to others. And whereas when such speech threatens any person, minority group, or religious community, residents should respond by educating others with voices and actions as loud as those spreading that hateful speech. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Cobb County Board of Commissioners does hereby denounce the actions of those who threaten members of our community, attempt to shatter the belief that Cobb County is a safe and welcoming place, and call for all to stand against their hate speech and attempts to divide our county. And this was yesterday on the 27th day of June 2023.
And it ended with a pledge to perform an act of kindness, right?
It did. And that was intentional because we didn't want to make it about the Nazis. We wanted to make it about what we were going to do next. And it's my understanding hundreds of people signed up from the community to do one kind thing. And if I had had the email addresses of those neo-Nazis, I would have sent them a note and said, I just want to let you know that we're one act of hate. Each of you inspired 10 or 15 acts of love. Just so you know, maybe that would have led them to discourage them from doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even, as you said, second guess their motivations and say, wow, look what I'm a part of, and look what I could be a part of instead.
If you saw the protesters, you would say, wow, they're so young.
Mm.
Not like kid,
Yeah.
but young adults, where you're like, I wonder how many friends they have. I wonder how many people they're connected to. I wonder how many people are looking or talking to them or mentoring them. Who are they in community with? Who's their community? Because most times when people are driven to some form of projecting fear or hatred, it's a result of a disconnection with a larger community, and they connect with a different community that gives them a space to feel like they belong. And that happens way more often than I think anyone would like to admit. But it's usually the people that we cast away that then feel excluded, who come back to try to exclude others. It's almost like a pain begets pain type of syndrome. It's not every case, but you could tell that those that were protesting, there was something in the eyes that just felt disconnected from the community.
What are some lessons that you've discussed with the Jewish community here, and anybody else has asked you how to move forward?
I think there's several different dimensions to that question. I think for the Jewish community, it's about how we continue to be proud of who we are. Rabbi Silverman and I have also had this conversation on many occasions. It's about Jewish pride in our community and standing up for who you are, observing your holidays. This coming week is Rosh Hashanah, doing it proudly in the community, not being afraid. I will never forget one of the saddest moments I had being the rabbi in this community was after, not this event, but one of the previous ones happened. And someone said, we're pulling our kids out of our preschool because we just don't think synagogue is a safe place to be. That was heartbreaking. Not to mention, you were talking about security at the program. I mentioned, hundreds of thousands of dollars that are spent by synagogues, and I'm sure, unfortunately, mosques, and even now I'm made to understand churches locally, all because of our security needs. It's very complicated, and that's a broader conversation for the community. I think one of the lessons, though, on a more positive, uplifting note, is also how it is that we don't wait for moments like this for us to come together.
Correct.
I'm sure you're seeing that, Commissioner, in your work too.
Correct. I always like to, how can we be proactive?
Rather than reactive. Right?
Exactly.
So down that line, so what lessons can community leaders, public and private, share with the greater community?
We have to find that which is in common and can bring us together. Whether it's good works, charity in the community, whether it's loving your neighbor as you love yourself, finding those tenets that are things that we all have in common and using those to bring our kids together.
So we talked about before, but I know these interfaith services occasionally do take place. So I attend St. Anne's, a Catholic parish here in East Cobb, and there was a Passover held together last year with Rabbi Slomovitz. Should we be doing more of that? Do you think those are productive?
Yes, and I'm glad you said you attend St. Anne's Parish, because our community has a very close relationship with Father Ray and St. Anne's Parish. You may or may not know that Father Ray, who is the retired, or recently, I think, just pastor, his father was a liberator of the concentration camps. Was a soldier in World War II. So we have always had a very close thing. We do our Holocaust commemoration each and every year with St. Anne's. We do many of our education lessons together, our kickoff programs. Yes, things like Rabbi Slomovitz, who's been a longtime member here, runs this Christian Jewish Discovery Center, which educates Christians about their Jewish roots. Yes to that. Yes to my friends at Kol Emeth running an interfaith ecumenical Thanksgiving every year. Yes to that. But again, just finding those common moments where we can come together and do things together is so important, and it's going to get increasingly more important if we're going to combat this bigotry and hatred we see in our world.
I think this type of education builds understanding, it builds empathy, and so when this type of adversity comes up again, I think people just know how to react to it better and understand just the depth of the community that they're around.
Yes,
So,
and I should add that the AJC actually ran, the American Jewish Committee ran a unity Seder. They do one across the city. I believe it maybe hear this actually coming year, which is people of all faiths and communities who have never learned necessarily about, been exposed to a Seder, attended a Passover Seder. It's a great opportunity to do that. I will also add, it should also probably be sustained engagement. It's really important. One of the best things I've done in my 7 years here was our men's club started in conjunction with St. Anne's, a fellowship where we had 5 St. Anne's parishioners, teenagers, along with 5 teenagers from Yitzchayim, learn and study about the Holocaust, and then travel to Washington, D.C. to visit the museum together. They didn't just visit the museum. They went to the National Cathedral in Washington, and they also visited a synagogue in Washington. And through those building relationships and spending time together, I can imagine a lot of potential, not hatred, but a lot of potential, prejudices, right, were laid to rest by both sides. Yeah. It was very important. And we hope to do more things like that in the future as well.
Say, I know I'm listening very intently to what it is that you want to do, because one of the things we really focus on in the office is getting programs out the door. Their grassroots means engaging communities that aren't always engaged, and so definitely want to do that in partnership. If you have some concrete program ideas that you would like to see happen, we roll them out very effectively and quickly in the office.
I appreciate that, and let's definitely continue the conversation. Any number of these interfaith kinds of initiatives are just so important, and I know it would mean the world to have our local commissioners sponsoring them or helping them to help even just publicizing them to get the word out. So
lots of different ways that we can make it happen.
Well, thank you for your leadership.
Of course. Blessing.
Blessing to you and everybody. Thank you.
well, thank you very much for your time today. I know it's a busy week, busy weekend coming up. We look forward to just continuing to work with you and the community and just building the strength that we already have.
thank you so much for your time. And as we celebrate Rosh Hashanah this week, many blessings for you and for your families. We pray and hope for a clean slate in the new year. I hope you are blessed with that same sense of clean slate and to new beginnings in the new year.
Thank you. Excellent.